Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. Um, we'll just wait for a couple of minutes while we have more people come in before kickstarting the session. Hi, Pramath. Hi, Bharat.
Hi,
Nikhil.
Nikhil.
Good morning, Nikhil, and Bharat, welcome.
Thank you, Pramath.
Joining us early in the morning. Are you enjoying a nice cup of coffee?
Some herbal tea.
Oh, you're a herbal tea guy. I often crave for the authentic South Indian filter coffee. Somehow, however much you try, one is not able to get the taste that one can get in the
Get
South.
over here. Yeah, so I've never gotten onto the coffee habit from childhood.
Nikhil, perhaps we can get started. People will join as we go along. In any case, this is being recorded for viewership over time.
Sure, we'll get started. So, good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us at the inaugural session of Campus Charcha. My name is Nikhil, and I lead student engagement and customer experience at Harappa Education. Institution leaders today are acutely aware of the evolving higher education landscape and the urgent need for universities to respond and adapt to these changes. Through this Campus Charcha series, we hope to create a platform for higher education leaders across India to explore the future of learning along with emerging trends and challenges. Every fortnight, we'll have a leading educationist in conversation with Harappa's founder and chairman, Pramath, on a new aspect of the evolving role of learning institutions today. This week, we're discussing the future of higher education in a disruptive world to draw insights on how institutions can compete and survive in a turbulent environment. We'll discuss how universities can transcend the barriers of technological demands, rising expectations, and limited resources to give students what they need to thrive in the 21st century workplace. As someone who is passionate about the impact of learning, I'm thrilled to introduce our speakers today. Both are stalwarts in the field of education here in India. Pramath is an entrepreneur, institution builder, academic, executive, and philanthropist. He is the founding dean of the Indian School of Business and the founder and trustee of India's first liberal arts university, Ashoka University. He is also the founder and chairman of Harappa Education, a learner-centered online institution for behavioral learning. Pramath also mentors and advises various educational groups that seek his expertise. Bharat is the president of Geetam University and someone for whom I have great respect for because of the progressive changes he is driving. Bharat is a board member of TIE Amravati, an entrepreneurs organization Andhra Pradesh. He holds an undergraduate degree from Purdue University and a joint MBA and Masters in Education from Stanford. Bharat has also worked extensively as an entrepreneur in developing renewable energy, sustainable growth, and waste management solutions. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Pramath for the discussion, and we'll be back towards the end with questions. I request each one of you in the audience to post your questions for both Pramath and Bharat in the Q&A window. Thanks, and over to you, Pramath.
Thank you, Nikhil, and good morning, Bharat. This is a real privilege to be speaking with you today, and I don't say that lightly because in the little time that I've gotten to know you, I think what you're trying to do at Geetam and your vision of where you want to take Geetam and education in general in India is very inspiring, and I really mean that. So it's a real privilege to host you today and also to kick off this series that we are all excited about with you.
Yes, thank you for having me, Pramajit. It's my pleasure to be here. I look forward to the discussion.
Yeah. I thought we could start, Bharat, by talking a bit about your own personal journey. And I know that your family has been associated with education for a long time. What are your first memories growing up of Geetam and realizing that you were part of a family that was running a college or a university at that time. Can you
Yes,
take us back to that point?
it's actually, I don't know if it's a funny story. It's definitely an interesting one. I knew that Geetam existed from my childhood because it was started before I was born. But I'd never actually visited the campus or understood how it was working until my early teens. And when I was in high school and I was preparing for my undergraduate program, the debate was, should I study in India or should I study in the US? And my family was torn. My grandfathers, both very strong figures in my life, and they were both very insistent that I should study in India. And so I realized halfway through my intermediate program that I won't get into the IITs. So I'm not going to even try. I started preparing for the SAT and for the applications. I applied. So I didn't do great at my applications, but I got into Purdue. And my dad suddenly took a stand that he'll support me to go and study in the US. So that was great. But by that point, my paternal granddad, the founder of Geetam, said that no, you will study at Geetam. And I've decided the program. Your roommate is going to be a topper in this ECE program. He already selected my roommate, and I was going to be living on campus. And I was really scared by that entire thing because I was like, if the grandson of the president studying in that campus, I'd be spoiled. I wouldn't get any exposure or independence. And all my life, I've grown up very close to my family and around both leaders, grandfathers who were businessmen who became politicians, philanthropists. So I thought it would be nice to go to the US and live by myself and build some independence. So that was the first thing. So my father took that stand and he supported me, and I escaped from studying at Geetam, not because I didn't like Geetam, but because of the circumstances. And my granddad was upset. So he didn't speak to my father for almost a year, saying that, why didn't you admit him in Geetam? And their fears may have been multifold. I would have settled down in the US, or I would have gotten married to an American and wouldn't have come back. I don't know. So I did my undergrad in engineering and I moved back. And my first major job was working in Geetam. I graduated in 2010 and I started working in Geetam in Feb of 2011. So that way it was good. So while I didn't come to Geetam as a student, I did come as as a very young employee.
Wow, that's a fascinating story. Especially, I can see the motivations behind both the parties.
Yeah.
That, and I admire your grandfather to, he was literally putting his money where his mouth was, right? Saying, "Listen, my grandson will go into this university." Uh, I've been associated with founding so many universities, and often we say that the day that our founders' children start coming to this university will be the day that we really know that we've kind of made it.
Right.
So that was a big signal that he would also have given, and I'm sure he was. It was more than the worry that you were going to get married to an American woman, but that was also bold of you, I guess, at that time. And I guess that streak of independence or wanting to do things your way. When you came to Geetam after Purdue, what was your reaction, having spent 4 years with one of the top universities in the US?
Yeah. So I did engineering at Purdue. I was an industrial engineer. And I think a lot of the program was about quality control, optimization, ergonomics. It was very math heavy, a subject that I like. And I think the idea also was that within the engineering discipline, while my family, my father's side was deeply into manufacturing and was running quite a few manufacturing enterprises, that I would have to work in those organizations. So I didn't want to go deep into any one field, and industrial engineering was good in the sense that I got a little bit of exposure into everything. So when I came back to India and I started working in Geetam, I didn't realize how that my education would help me. But I think the approach that it got me in life was everything that I look, I observe very keenly, and I see how do we optimize, and how do we identify, if there's any issue, or how do we get to the root cause. And I was quite surprised on how different the education was that I got and what we were offering in Gita. At Purdue, it was a lot more emphasis on continuous learning. I was expected to do my pre-reads before every class. There was a homework after every class, which I did diligently. And at which point the term exam or midterm examinations were just like what we already studied. We didn't have to study in particular for that exam. And even the environment within the classroom, participation was encouraged, and it was a critical part of your grade, because we used to have something called a CPS clicker, I think. They used to ask us questions and on the screen, and we had to click the answer. And there are workarounds. You can send your friend with your clicker and ask him to click it for you, but most often I used to go myself. And so that was a really nurturing environment. I really loved that experience. And the other part was that the load wasn't too high. I did about 15 credits a semester. It was somewhere between 16 to 20 contact hours a week. And the grading was, Purdue actually doesn't inflate their grades. So it was quite a tough grading environment. And the other interesting thing was that about 24 credits of my 120 credits needed for graduation were from general education electives, which meant that I did courses in psychology, in history, in French. So that diversity of learning, I think, really helped me. But when I came to Geetam, we were much more intensive. We were a 160 credit program. About 40 contact hours a week, a lot more emphasis on theoretical learning, on rote memorization, on regurgitation of your learning onto the exam paper, and a lot less participation in the classroom, and very little multidisciplinarity. It was very deep into the program of study. So I was quite surprised, and I felt that this needed to change.
And that's how the journey of transforming Geetam started. And was going and getting a master's in education part of that journey as well? You felt that it would be great to go back.
Yeah, so I think the context of going to Stanford was that my granddad was a rich businessman when he set up Geetam. It was in his mid 40s. And he always looked at Geetam as a way to give back. It was a philanthropic initiative. And in 2004, when he lost as a member of parliament, having been a parliament member twice before, he had a lot of time on his hand. His businesses were run by his children. So he really invested his time and energy into Geetam and built it to what it was in 2018 when he passed away. And so during that time when I was working there, he used to keep telling me that you just began. You haven't earned any money. You haven't built your name. So I'm giving you an opportunity for you to learn how to work, but don't think this is your career. So leave, go build a business, earn some money. When you can donate to Geetam, you can come back. So he pushed me out, so to say, in 2013, and in 2014, I applied to school.
How long had you been at Geetam after?
So I was at Geetam until the day I went to Stanford. So it was August of 2014. So a little over 3.5 years. I applied to graduate school in 2013. I got married in 2013. And I was fortunate to get into Stanford and for the MBA, not for the MA education. And I applied only for the MBA with the idea to sort of pivot out of education, get into business, continue as a board member in Geetam, which I was inducted in 2012, and come back someday, because I fell in love with education and the kind of impact that we were having. And during my time there, I was really getting deeply involved. And that's when my granddad said, it's not good, get out. And when I went to Stanford, the opportunity to pursue a joint degree was available. And I had multiple options. There was a joint degree in engineering, joint degree in public policy, joint degree in education. So both my granddads are politicians, as you know, Pramath. So I was also very interested in impacting people's life through public life. But between the two, I felt that a more focused effort in education was necessary because that is where I had spent my last 3.5 years. And that is where I felt the qualification was something that was needed, right? So yeah, the perception in India is driven more by how many degrees you have, maybe more than how much value you bring to the table. So that was another reason. The signaling effect of doing an education degree drove me to do it.
Sure.
But the experience of doing the education degree was fantastic because the cultural difference between the business school and the education school was quite stark.
Yeah.
The business school was viewed at as these money-hungry, aggressive A-type personalities, and the ed school was comprised of these more noble, service-oriented thinkers who want to sacrifice. So I felt that there's merit in both. I don't think you shouldn't chase success. But at the same time, having noble values is inspirational. I enjoyed greatly from the cultural differences beyond the learning from both the programs. You're on mute.
Did business happen? Did you come back to start a business
Yeah.
or work in a business before you
Yes.
came back to Geetam?
Yeah, so 2018. So I finished both the degrees in 2018, moved back, and I started working. I set up a small energy plant in Agra, a 3.5 megawatt solar power plant. And then I started working on a 20 megawatt hydro power plant, and that was with my father. And at that time, I was really excited because most of the work that you put in energy is during the time of installation. Once you establish the power plant, because these are renewable units, operationally, they are far more easier to manage. But I did not enjoy that work. I don't think I was at my productive best. And also dealing with a lot of regulatory agencies and banks meant that a lot of my time was spent inefficiently. But I think during my 2-year stint working in that space, over time, I sort of fell into the groove and started getting used to it. Because Stanford was a very high energy, very like dynamic environment, and working in where in the energy space was quite slow and not very intellectually stimulating. But I continued as a board member at Geetam during my 2 years. Then I was involved in like the quarterly board meetings and peripherally involved in how the organization was operating. I didn't expect that I would make that transition in 2 years.
And so, talk to me about the return to Geetam, as it were, after
Yeah.
that stint. So, when did you do that, and how did that happen?
Yeah, so in 2018, when I was in business and I was in the process of establishing that power plant, my granddad got a dengue fever, Dr. Murthy. He got dengue fever in April, May of 2018. And I think he thought that he wouldn't make it out alive. So when I met him, to what he perceived as his deathbed, he said, Bharat, I want you to move to Vizag full time. I want you to contest elections because I don't think I can be active anymore. So that he never encouraged me to get into public life. He said that you're too young, earn money, we'll see later. So that really was like surprising. I then it impacted me, but I waited, and fortunately he recovered. And when he recovered, I met him and I said, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Yes." Then I said, "Okay, I'm ready. Let's do it." Then we made a lot of plans. He didn't want me to live with him. He wanted me to get a house of my own, build my own identity. And I was in that process. I found a house. I was flying to Vizag to sign my agreement on the early hours of 3rd of October in Indian time. And I get the news that my granddad got into a fatal accident in the US. He passed away in Alaska. And then it was just a chaotic month. The entire family was shaken, and dealing with that itself took us some time. But the challenge then was that it's not just about public life, but now Geetam lost its president. And who's going to lead that? And as a family, my granddad, my uncle and my dad are not on the board. And in the family, like I was the only other person who had been working in Geetam, who was on the board. And I had 2 other cousins, but they hadn't worked in Geetam before. The dilemma was this guy is 29 years old. How will he lead a 23,000 student organization? He may have worked here, he may have board experience, but that still doesn't cut it. But I was very keen. And fortunately, the stars aligned, and my family and the board all came on board and supported me to sort of step into that role. I became the president of Geetam in November 2018.
Wow, what a journey. A bit tragic to lose your granddad like that, but a great transition for you into something that you clearly love. And was that something that you knew? You seem to really love education and what you're doing. Do you think you've discovered that in the last 2 years?
Yeah, so I think I realized my love during my first stint here in 2011 to 14. And the reason I loved it was you have the opportunity to impact individuals deeply.
Hmm.
Whereas the contrast for me, having been in a family of politicians, is through public life, you have a very broad impact, but the depth is low. So I wanted to sort of balance both the sort of worlds. And in education, when you have students with you for 2, 3, 4 years, you have an opportunity to shape their personality, instill values, create some purpose for those individuals. So that's what I really enjoyed. And the other was, by virtue of being a deemed university, I think we got a lot more freedom in the Indian regulatory environment to try new things. And that freedom was exciting. And uh, from being a governing body member to becoming a president was, earlier I had a lot of ideas and very few translated into action. Now the buck stops with me. So anything that I take now, I don't see as much resistance in implementing versus before. But now I know that if it doesn't go right, then I am accountable for it. So I enjoy that. I enjoy that level of ownership, that level of responsibility, and also the opportunity to transform the higher education space, both internally at Geetam and also being sort of a signal for change across the country.
That's so wonderful to hear, because I think that with the many years you have ahead of you, and with that kind of passion, I'm sure this is a great match, and I can already see that. So let's switch gears a little bit. How do you think about the changes that you are driving it? If you had to pick the themes or the 2, 3, 4 things that you are driving, how do you think about it? Be helpful.
So I think in my first few months, what I kept articulating to our team was that there's 4 fundamental tenets of how I would like to go about what we're doing at Geetam. The first was articulating a goal, and the goal then was to sort of chase excellence, and we wanted to build a global 100 university by 2040. So I think that was one aligning factor that brought sort of everyone together. And the second was that in my time with Geetam over the last 8, 9 years at the time, I realized that one of the root causes of what limited us from realizing our potential was the lack of high quality leadership. So bringing in good leaders into the system was one of my main agendas. And I think we've been fairly successful in doing that. In my last 2.5 years here, I think we've got on board close to 40, 50 leaders with diverse experiences in both academic, in support, and academic support roles at Geetam. So that was the second thing, bringing in leaders. The third was that the system development. I think we, in a highly regulated environment, even the structure and system is given to us by UGC, saying that this is the system that you should follow. But for me, it was that system is not very efficient. So within the ambit of that regulatory framework, how do we make the systems more transparent, more agile? So those are something that we are working on very aggressively, especially in the support side, like the HR, the IT, the finance. Because the way I looked at it was our earlier system was limiting a good leader to perform not more than 40, 50%, and a bad leader could take us down to 0. The systems that we wanted to create were that a bad leader cannot take us below 40, and a good leader can take us to 100%. So creating enabling systems was something that was critical. And lastly, and most importantly, was that why are we doing all of this? we may offer an education, we may want to excel, but what is the purpose? And I think for me, having seen India through the lens of public life, vicariously through my grandfathers, it was that we're living in a society that is increasingly losing control of what values we are giving to our young, and what role models we are setting up for the future. And I thought the education ecosystem is a great place to impact that. So we wanted to be an organization that stands for its values, for its culture. We're named after Gandhi, and my granddad, avid follower. It's a very interesting coincidence that he passed away October 2nd, Indian Standard Time. And so for me, that was like a message from God, right? So this is what you need to stand for. And so what did Gandhiji stand for? He stood for honesty, for ahimsa, for service to society, for resilience, amongst many other things. And I thought that these are things that we should practice, that we should incorporate in our students. And I think today's age also calls for collaboration, for agility, for diversity. So I think these are maybe the 6 or 7 core values that we take very seriously. And we'd like to incorporate that in the organizational culture, and then eventually in all of the students who graduate out of here.
Fantastic. So the vision of being top 100 by 2040 globally, leadership, systems, and values. Those are kind of the 4 priorities that you're focused on. And if you think about those, it strikes me that the 4th one is the hardest to do. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure. It is the hardest to do.
And especially because you're trying to do that in the organization, as well as what are some of the challenges and how have you dealt with that on that one dimension?
Yeah, because I think we live in a society, and the external society may not be where you are. So but your stakeholders are members who interact with the society and interact with Geetam simultaneously. So they may see a different world once they leave the campus, and we are trying to create a different world inside the campus. So the challenge is quite high. But internally, what we're doing is first, the change begins with me. So I need to practice the values that I want to see in Geetam. So I need to have integrity. I need to be empathetic. I need to be someone who has a strong sense of service to society. I need to be resilient. So I work really hard to display and practice those values. And I think there's hypocrisy across the board, and that includes me. There are times when I say something and I do something else. So I have to watch myself, and I have to correct myself every time I do that, and do the same for the leaders. And this is something that is a very constant part of my dialogue. And because I handpick the leaders that come in, we're also looking for the leaders to be someone who comes from that value system. And so that way it makes it easier. And I think a lot of the team and leaders who are here from before are very committed, very loyal to the organization. But over time, they sort of lost their way in terms of how to transition from a teaching institution, which we were for about 27 years, to a more global research-oriented organization. So that's where I think the mix of the new leaders and the new mindset is really bringing all of these things together.
The challenge of managing the transition is actually the toughest, right? Because if you are setting up something new, you don't have to deal with legacy, but looks like you are actually taking something that's already been around for over 20 years, right?
So Geetam's 1980. So we've had it for about 40 years now. Yeah.
40 years. So something that has existed and thrived for 40 years, and you're kind of changing the engines of the plane as it is flying. That's not easy.
Yeah, that's the hardest part.
Yeah, I have to say that, listen, I'm not saying this to flatter you, but you're very articulate about what you are doing and how you think. So it's great to talk to you because it's very engaging to hear and you're so precise. And the thing about your walking the talk, it comes through, because what you're talking is that so authentic. You're able to articulate it so powerfully.
Thank you.
Let's talk a bit about some of the broader themes that you see for in Indian education, which you are going to try, what you are trying to change through Geetam. And talk to me a little bit also about how the American sort of education, both undergrad and postgraduate, you talked a little bit about how it shaped, but what elements of that do you think are transferable or infusable, if you will, in the Geetam environment?
Yeah, I think most of the principles are transferable. I think we just have to be conscious of how the ecosystem is different. In the US, largely the students who come to school, culturally in the US, by the time you're 18 years old, you're expected to leave the house, build your own identity, build your own career. So half of the students who come to school take debt of their own. So because at that point, they're already like, okay, I'm by myself. So then they're more accountable for their lives, and they feel the pinch. So they work hard and they do their homework because they know that there's no fallback. And that's why the system also is suited to be more sort of practical oriented, more learn at your own pace kind of an environment. Whereas in India, that doesn't exist. All students continue to be dependent and controlled by their parents through the education program. So, which would include what program should they study, whether they should live on campus or off campus, and how they actually approach learning. So that is a big difference. And I think that's where the challenge of implementation lies, because I could try to be like Purdue, or maybe in India, for example, I could try to be like a BITS Pilani where attendance is not even mandatory, right? But for our audience of 23,000, that will be chaos. That wouldn't work. So I think what we realized then is that we know where we want to go, but we realize that it's not a switch on, switch off phenomenon. We have to gradually get ourselves there. So take the principles from the US, from institutions that have been successful, and see how we infuse them slowly. Because what do we want? We want an environment of ownership. We want an environment of sort of risk taking where there is less or no fear of failure. We want an environment of trust and mutual respect where the faculty member is comfortable being questioned in the classroom. The student is comfortable asking questions in the classroom. So all of these things need to change. I think we are in a more hierarchical environment where older people don't appreciate younger people questioning them. So even within the faculty or leadership ecosystem, we were a very hierarchical organization. And now we are saying that doesn't work. I would like to see a future where maybe we can refer to each other by first name, because that really breaks those barriers. And you trust people by what value they bring to their table intellectually, more than what title or what age they bring to the table. So in that sense, I think it's not an apples to apples comparison. So so we work on things slowly, but the principles are the same. And we do want to bring in those elements of learning that really make students and individuals thrive.
Very well put again. I picked up on your words slowly. I think one of the things that I worry about when people are bringing about changes is that they want to do transformation very quickly and fast. And I learned the hard way, and of course, this is not about my story, but I learned the hard way that that just doesn't work, because ultimately you have to change things one individual, people, groups of people at a time, and it's not easy for people to change. So we never factor that in. We somehow think that you'll switch on, switch off, and things will change. But I like you mentioned that, and I think that's really perceptive that you are trying to make slow changes over time, and there's nothing wrong with that. These changes take time to sink in. Uh, every one of us really struggle with faculty and with the quality of faculty and the availability of faculty. How are you trying to deal with that? And in generally with the finding good leaders in India?
Yeah, so I think as far as leaders are concerned, I feel very fortunate that both within and from outside, we have a great set of leaders today. The leadership team comprises of close to 100 people now, and they are really sort of aligned and driven by this pursuit of this goal and these values. So that's great. I feel fortunate, and I think that's a continuous journey. We still have some gaps to fill, but overall, that's not an area that I'm very concerned about. It's the faculty level that I'm much more concerned about. How do we bring in high quality faculty into the ecosystem? Much more challenging. And how do we bring in sort of how do I put it, secondary, tertiary leaders? Because heads of institutions, deans, pro vice chancellors, functional heads, those have been relatively easy to recruit. But heads of departments, at that level, it's been much harder. And the reason being that good talent progresses quickly. And when you want to bring them in, and sort of perception-wise, Geetam is more an up-and-coming organization. It doesn't have the perception of an IIT or a BITS Pilani. So for me to attract a high-quality leader at the HOD level is hard. And what then happens is young faculty will come to you, right? Because if you pay them well or if you promise them a good future. But if they don't have a good ecosystem within their department, then retaining them becomes the hard part. So I think that way our human resource approach is that we have a strength of 1,500 faculty that cuts across 10 disciplines. The largest program is engineering, but we've got medicine, management, architecture, law, pharmacy, all of the major professional programs. So because we are at a large base, our intention is not to pursue sort of a niche or premium education ecosystem. Our intention is to more do excellence at scale. And my role mostly in the last 2.5 years has been to unleash the potential of the existing audience. So unleashing the potential would mean one, direct them in the right direction. So that they understand that they need to focus more on teaching and research and less on administrative activities or admissions or operations, right? Which unfortunately some faculty are made to do today. And then it is to see within every department who are the faculty who have a lot of great ideas. How do we bring them to the front? How do we ensure that their ideas impact the department? And then is give them the tools, give them the skills, give them the training, and provide the nurturing ecosystem where they feel supported, where they feel valued. So those things, especially with the support functions, have been sort of the low-hanging fruit. So we've transformed the way HR works, the way IT works, the way finance works, the way projects work, and also like creating a parallel entrepreneurship and sort of a student training ecosystem from day one. So all of these are like supports that are given to the faculty. So when that happens, what I'm seeing is automatically some faculty are rising up to the challenge and they are doing well. And then slowly infusing new blood in every department is something that we're working on. But like you said, this is a plane that's flying. You can't expect to switch off all of the engines and replace it with new ones. The plane will collapse. So we have to do it step by step.
Now, again, that's very wise. The fact that you're giving people who are already there a chance to grow themselves. I think as institutions, we perhaps overlook the fact that there's a lot of potential existent. One's first reaction is to go out and infuse new blood only. And I think you have to do that, of course, but trying to give people who are already there the chance to rise is something that people often miss out. So it's fantastic that you're taking care to do that. Uh, Talk to me a little bit about students. In your vision, what what are some of the things of the future, whether in terms of skills or learning or capability? We've talked some about the values clearly. what would be one or two things that you're seeing happening, which you'd like to see your students also imbibe and learn from Gita?
Yeah, sure. So I think so the values bit, like I said, is very important because we can sort of give skills, we can give competence, but what are they going to use it for? So the values bit is that tomorrow when you go out, you should stand for something. That's, like I said, is important. But some of the concerns right now, and which have been persistent for the last decade or more, is that most of the students who come to us are coming for a degree and are coming for a job. Lesser percentage of them are coming for learning. Lesser percentage of them are coming for sort of shaping their personality. At least explicitly, that's what we see. And that's a manifestation of our education system. I think we live in a country where the number of perceived opportunities are far lesser than the number of aspirants. So it's a rat race. Every parent wants their child to get educated in an IIT, in an IIM, or in an AIMS. So the pursuit of these entrance tests is very high. The JEE or the NEET. And what that means is most of the students from maybe even a decent school education until 10th grade suddenly transition to a very intensive test prep environment for their 11th and 12th grade. It's a very prevalent thing, particularly in the part of the country that we are located. And so those students are jailed up and just made into test-taking machines for 2 years. And when they come to us, it's almost like they've suddenly been given freedom and they don't know what to do with it. And I'm like concerned that maybe they've digressed a little bit from their mindset, even from their 10th grade. So when they enter our campus, most of them are chasing marks because they've used to, they've become test-taking junkies, right? So now moving them from a love for marks to a love for learning is a uphill challenge. And then it's also to move them from a very narrow focus to a more multidisciplinary focus, and also to learning outside the classroom. Because I think the relevance of campuses like Geetam is that we have a vibrant physical ecosystem, which we have not tapped. So when the students come to us, it is what learning and what supporting ecosystem can we provide outside of the classroom. So investing deeply into student life, into sports, into hospitality, I think those really create those opportunities for students to explore their personality, their interests. And I think that's the future in particular of physical education. I think the emphasis of knowledge dissemination and making students knowledgeable is only very one part of the solution. I think it's 360-degree development that we need to focus on. And the advent of COVID and the disruption has also made us embrace technology like never before. Like many people said, COVID has been the best CTO anyone can ask for. And that's great, right? That's really changed the way we operate, and we've brought on board a lot of blended learning practices. And that is really encouraging for how learning will evolve for the future.
That's again very perceptive, Bharat, because a lot of people are talking about the demise of the physical campus. But I think you're right that the physical campus will almost get reinvented uh, with with this blended model, and the actual physical activities that you provide on campus will be hugely value adding. I think we are getting ready for Q&A from the audience, and I think Nikhil is going to butt in and help moderate that. So Nikhil, do you want to take some of the questions that we've had coming in?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much, Pramath and Bharat. Such a fascinating discussion. I love the phrase that you mentioned, moving from love for marks to love for learning. Really, really interesting. So diving into some of the questions that are coming in, Dr. D.N. Pandey has a question, which is, we are a very old education society, establishing a new institute near Tirupati. And in the rapidly changing technology environment, what advice would you give on the nature of the programs that could be made available to the current generation And how does the institute think about keeping the curriculum relevant to the future challenges that are coming up?
Yeah, so I think firstly, in terms of establishing a new campus, um, my approach is don't. Right. So we already have 3 campuses in Visakhapatnam, Hyderabad, and Bangalore. I think the economics of higher education dictate that you need to be spending a lot more of your money on the campus ecosystem and your sort of intellectual value. So right now, every rupee that I have, I would rather spend on that. But I think the debate today is, oh, Geetam, do you want to open a new campus in Odisha? Do you want to open a new campus? So I'm like, I'm done with that. We've already done that with these 3. I mean, acquiring land, getting permissions is such a headache that I would rather put my energy on more depth in our existing campuses. But if we must, for some reason, open a new campus and we should see what programs we should start, I would say it's a very personal decision. So my thing, we are starting the School of Public Policy in Hyderabad, in Geetam. And this is not an economically viable program, but we're doing it because we're passionate about it. So I think it depends on what your motivations are. In terms of how do we keep the curriculum relevant, I wouldn't say it that way. What I would say is incorporate a culture of growth mindset in the organization, right? Where you're constantly learning and evolving. You're not stuck. And today, for a good curriculum, you can find a few experts. They'll tell you how to do it, and you can say that you want it this way or you want it that way. You want it more practical. But the thing is, every year, every day, that field will develop. It will change. So how do you incorporate that? So there's no one thing that's going to be successful forever. So once you are a constantly changing dynamic environment, then I think you're set for the future. And when you're receiving inputs from all sides, then you can automatically evolve.
Nikhil, just to make a small correction, it was Sachin Khedkar who asked that question. I think there's some mess up in the names in our Q&A box, but that was Sachin Khedkar. Dr. D.N. Pandey has asked a different question and we'll try and find that. Go ahead, Nikhil.
Great, Bharat. Thanks so much for that. So we have another question from Shrishti Bajaj, which is, how does creative and innovative mindset present itself in your institute? And I would just piggyback on that question to add, with the culture of continuous learning that you spoke about at Purdue, and the fact that you spoke about, creating, impact at depth. How would you think about driving, certain values such as innovation, creativity, collaboration, etc., that you spoke about?
Very hard. It's not easy because creativity, innovation comes from a place where it's okay to fail. It comes from a place where there isn't much judgment. So those are things that I cannot say that we have at Geetam today. There is a fear of failure. There is a fear of judgment. And when you can remove that, you can create more innovative ecosystems. What we have done is we've gone directly to the student. We've partnered with Northeastern University, who have been very successful in creating sort of a student-run entrepreneurship ecosystem. And it's a 3-year program, and they sort of create a funnel where they make all the students go through an introductory entrepreneurship course, and then they funnel that into a more focused program called the Ready, Set, Go. And each stage, Ready or Set or Go, makes students go through a very practical, hands-on, innovative program. So we have about 300 students who have gone through that, and this year we are to take on 600 students into that program. And we have coaches, and then once the students come out of this program, the students then become coaches themselves, and some faculty are then taken on as sort of mentors. And once this starts sort of growing and indicating some success factors, then we're looking at a larger ecosystem getting inspired by it. So we want to first demonstrate it, and I think show proof of the model. And then I think there'll be more believers, and there'll be more people who will adopt into it. And I think through that, in that ecosystem, I see a space where those barriers are not there. I see that there is lesser fear of failure, and there's lesser judgment, there's lesser hierarchy. And I think automatically that will sort of spread to the rest of the ecosystem.
Great, thank you so much. And moving to the next question, and Pramath, would love for you to also jump into this one. In the new education policy, out of all of the many recommendations, which are the ones that you think are fundamental to make a high quality institution and to grow education in India?
Go ahead, Bharat, if you'd like to go first, and I'll jump in as well.
Yeah, I think I keep saying this I've been in a few TV debates also, that uh, the government's mindset largely has over the years become a guilty until proven innocent kind of a mindset, which is unfortunate. And most of the rules and regulations are made to protect the minimum standard of quality, which does not interest me much. The ecosystem that we want to be in is, how do you maximize your potential? How do you aim for the sky? And the regulation doesn't speak like that. The new education policy does speak about saying that we want to give more freedom, we want more autonomy, we want more multidisciplinarity. Um, how much of that will be implemented is a question. What I would tell the government is, trust, and sort of you rank institutions, make the ranking and accreditation system robust, and regulation wise be far more liberal, and make the rankings trusted, make them prevalent, so that every village, every town, every city knows the rankings. Then what then happens is, even like from Geetam, when my student comes and asks me, oh, you're only ranked this in an RF, or your NAC is only this, then automatically the institution then realizes that I need to do well on that. And then it becomes a race to the top. Free market philosophies will apply, and every institution in that ecosystem will then realize that I need to be on that ranking ecosystem if I need to do well. And then the pursuit of excellence is automatic, because everyone wants to stay relevant, everyone wants to attract better students. But if we don't do that, then what then happens is, then you are able to confuse the student in the absence of a transparent ranking and accreditation system.
I completely agree with what Bharat is saying. I think I've also been saying for many years now that this whole system of raising quality is, how do you raise quality, is a solved problem around the world. And the way we as a human race, and as governments, policymakers, regulators, educationists around the world have solved it, is exactly what Bharat is talking about, where the philosophy is that you lower the level of regulation and tighten the level of accreditation and ranking or measurement of quality outcomes. And then you reward them. In fact, in many countries, the level of funding given to institutions, even public institutions, government institutions, is driven by the accreditation and the ranking. And people have to go ahead and do that. And the accreditation bodies are many. But to the specific issue of the NEP, I do think that multidisciplinarity, which has been repeated and repeated throughout, is an important aspect that at least has now come into the normal lexicon of labels that we are using in education, which is very valuable, because we've been very tech or STEM or specialization focused, whether it's law or architecture or design or and business. And I do think the focus, and I'm biased obviously because of Harappa, but the focus on the critical thinking, the holistic development, leadership skills, uh, is also extremely welcome. So I think those are the two things, and they both have to do with curriculum, and to Bharat's point, giving people a chance to truly develop their full potential. I think that recognition in the NEP is important. I think how it will get implemented and manifest, what Bharat is struggling with at one institution we have to do for a system, and that was going to take years and years to get done. Back to you, Nikhil.
Great, thanks. So just moving into the to a last set of questions. So Bharat, you spoke about the importance of transformation and the role that faculty plays. I think there's one question that's come in on the ability to attract the right caliber of students. So how should an institute think about solving for that? As they go on in their journey.
Yeah, so that's a big challenge because it's sort of it's like network effect. If you have good students, you get better students, and if you don't have good students, it's harder to attract them. What I saw was that a lot of people in the education space, particularly in the private sector, um, were used to making empty promises and fake promises, right? And it's like it's the old saying, right? Tell 100 lies to get a marriage done. And now that was maybe the culture of the past. Now it is, if you build a marriage on a lie, then the marriage itself is on a very weak foundation. It may break. So my approach at Geetam, what we work together as a team is do what you say and say what you do, right? So don't say anything that you cannot do, and it doesn't matter whether students come or don't. And so then one is when you're appealing to the authenticity of the individual, and the other is that speak about what you want to do, right? Because I want to be multidisciplinary. I want to be a values-driven organization. I want to attract students who are dreaming big. So that's sort of incorporated into the language. And the other is that a lot of institutions that do a lot of marketing and advertising probably do it because they're not very confident about their product. And they want to keep reaching out to new audience. But your biggest ambassadors are your own students. And if they have a good experience, then they bring a lot more admissions to you than any of your advertisements do. So in that sense, the emphasis has been inward. Is how do we create a better experience for our existing students? How do we create a better experience for our faculty? How do we make them trust that Geetam is going in the right direction? And that is where I spend a lot more of our energy. I spend much lesser energy on the external world, because if my own ambassadors don't trust in me, it doesn't matter what I go sell to the world. And so that itself is a work in progress. I think it may take us a year or two more to fully earn the trust of our stakeholders. But I think we've made some significant progress in that direction over the last 2 years.
Yeah. Pramath, anything that you would like to add? Because you've also set up a number of institutions.
All I can say is that Bharat is saying things that are almost so clearly articulated and perfectly worded that I don't want to take anything away. And his point about do what you say and say what you do, if all institutions in India just did that, right, which is, if you think about it, a self-accreditation process, right, we would be fine. Students will be fine. We'll find the right level for our institutions. We'll find the motivation to improve relative to where we are and where we can go. Unfortunately, we haven't done a great job of that as a country. And marketing and advertising has become more important than ensuring the authenticity that Bharat is talking about. And I think that is where we do disservice to students, and it never works. The network effect is very strong. Students and parents are very discerning. We assume that they are not, but they are very discerning. And once the word gets out, no amount of advertising and marketing can help you. So no, I don't want to add. I'm sorry, I've already added, but I'm really a big proponent of what Bharat is saying.
Great, thank you. And we are at 9:30, right on time. So I want to thank you, Pramath and Bharat, for such an open and authentic discussion that was really filled with personal anecdotes and stories. And also want to thank the audience for joining in for this first campus Charcha session. Before we close the session, would request Pramath and Bharat to quickly pose for a virtual selfie with the world that we're now living in. And we'd love to take a photograph together. So Mehak, if you can let us know when that's done.
I'll also like to quickly thank Bharat. And the thought that came to my mind, Bharat, is that I know we've interacted many times, but this has been really a tremendous discussion. Really, I mean that. And all I can say is that I know that you were very inspired by your grandfather, and he couldn't be prouder of how you are taking forward this legacy. I really feel that in just the conversation that we've had. So I'm sure all his blessings are with you, but God bless you and all the very best with what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Pramath. I think it's my pleasure and privilege to be here with you, speaking to you. And thank you, Nikhil, for having me. I really enjoyed talking and really enjoyed debating on these points. I think this should be happening more in India and should be reaching more of the discerning stakeholders, because I want this should be something that many institutions think about. That's when I think true change will happen.
Several institution leaders I recognize are on listening to us as well as on YouTube and Facebook. And so you're absolutely right. I think that's why we've started this series, and that couldn't have been a better start. Thank you so much, Bharat.
Thank you, Pramath.